I went ahead and finally went to someone that I was referred and referred and referred all the way up, and people are like, I talked to someone that was slightly closer, like, you need to go to this guy if you're writing with what is happening. I can't tell you just the serious level of it. Kept telling me to go to this guy, and I tried finding other people closer to me. Um, and even the guy that referred me could have maybe done the same thing, but I think he was just a little too, no, you might be quoted, not YouTube video, but something bigger, you know, I don't know. But this was the person that still had a really good reputation, had studied chemistry, and just really, really knew what he was doing. But he lived 6 hours away from me. So last Saturday, I drove 6 hours all the way up to San Francisco. Did this, took a couple hours, came back home, picked that guy's brain. It was probably super annoying, but it's been great this year to really find people, talk to people that are a lot. I just have never collected before. I don't know all this, but he physically handled it. He did measurements of it, and then he verified it's a Carta de Vista. He believes it's an 1860s Carta de Vista. And he, of course, analyzed the back. He took his own pictures of it. He handled it. The coloring is as consistent with the 1860s. So again, it's not modern. That's the point. Very photographic, but it appears to be a copy of an earlier photograph, and he thinks it's likely an ambrotype or daguerreotype, given the 1860s date of this Carta de Vista. And he explains the reasons why, and then he gives a condition. He says that he thought it was in a very humid location. I mean, Nauvoo is very, very humid. And just verifying, the type of glue and all those things. Like it looks very, very authentic. I mean, we didn't pick off parts and run it under a machine or anything, which might have cost a few $1,000s, which I can't afford quite yet, but I don't know. I mean, if somebody was willing to do that for free, I would do it. So far, nobody's offered for free. Some people, I don't know. But what's good about this is a copy of a daguerreotype, which is what I've had to come around to thinking that I always thought maybe it was always a paper photograph because I go off on, The Pencil of Nature by Henry Fox Talbot, that he was doing paper photography early 1840s. It's possible. But the theory that it was a copy of a daguerreotype, this guy explained, but Joseph Smith III talks about having a daguerreotype of his father and talks about that painting, and made other videos talking about that they were looking at the photograph to edit the painting, but they sustained the painting and its characteristic likeness, but there's no evidence that the photo became before the painting. So the painting came and then the photo came, and a couple of decades later it's maybe getting damaged, and they're looking at the daguerreotype and updating it and probably changing it, so it's probably not looking much like how David Rogers did it originally. I don't know if they changed the hair, if just David Rogers changed the hair, because it doesn't match what Maudsley definitely depicted of Joseph Smith with much less hair. June 1842, September 1842, David Rogers is saying he has more hair, so I don't know. But yeah, that daguerreotype, he gave his reasons for that. He also analyzed the back and said that looked authentic, and it was fun to explain to him all the supportive evidence. And he, explained, I always wonder, like, he's a very, very nice camera, so you can see great details now. This was taken by Godwin Weaver and in his studio with really good lighting. But that background, he thought, looked just too unique. He's like, that's a very unique background that matches Emma Smith's unique background that we think Lucien Foster took. So if you go here, yeah, I should change my website. It's hard to see that there's other pages here. A lot of people don't read the other pages, but this background is just so unique. And one thing he was talking about was asking me a lot about Lucien Foster in his studio, but I've looked at, because it's a church history site. I think the CUNY Christ has taken over Nauvoo, and they do, yeah, and then they sort of do like you know, they let people come and do tours and stuff like that. But they have sort of landmarked all these different, the names of whose house was what. And I found nothing that said Lucian Foster's studio, even though I found a newspaper article saying his studio was on Main Street. I looked all up and down Main Street online and tried to see if there was anything that was, you know, named, stamped, or whatever on their website that said Lucian Foster's studio, and it just didn't. But you know, one thing he did mention was usually the light is good. They have a window and they usually have a skylight, and he's trying to compare where the shadows are on these two people to see, just to verify that this was in the correct perspective. So that was one thing I was a little bit concerned about. And so one thing that does make sense is the lighting's coming from opposite directions. So the window's over here. To her, the window's over there. And I do know this is copied from the daguerreotype, so this is quite a bit clearer, a little bit clearer than mine. And so he thinks there's a few ways, if this is actually Library of Congress, they're explaining daguerreotypes. Hopefully, oh, I did change the page. Go back. Okay. It was a prism. They would put like, they could make a daguerreotype end up in the correct perspective if the camera was fitted with a mirror or prism that would flip it around, especially when they were doing landscapes and historical buildings. They wanted to take daguerreotypes of them, but they wanted them to be in the correct perspective. They could do that, or they could just take a daguerreotype. They could be copied by re-daguerreotyping it. That would end up in the correct perspective. And his opinion was that made a lot of sense, that quite possibly was the case here, because, of course, I think if you watch my video, you know, it's all in the correct perspective to the death mask. Here I'm doing individual features, but before I owned it, I was analyzing it, outlining every feature, and putting on the death mask. Of course, I lined up the death mask, but it needs to be in the right perspective. If this was in the wrong perspective, it doesn't make sense. So I just was very relieved to know that it really was an established process, that they could make a daguerreotype itself be in the correct perspective with the first go, or they could re-daguerreotype it. And he says it's very possible that they took a daguerreotype of the original daguerreotype and then took a carta de vista of that daguerreotype, maybe. Or they just, Lucian Foster had that little mirror he could just attach to his camera. So yeah, it just all matches up extremely, extremely well. The backgrounds, he said, were just extremely unique. And so yeah, it's hard. If I set up this website so that it could be looked at on like a computer, but then again, if you go up to here, you don't see these. You have to like scroll down and be like, oh, there's other pages. And I name change. I don't know. I need to change the names of this and organize it a little bit better. But yeah, this is my update now. I'm trying to sell copies. I was being funny there because it made me put like an original price. I'm like, why can't I just put a price there? But yeah, if you want to help me out with all the costs of all these things that I'm doing and the time and effort to put in to do this, you can follow me on Patreon. Or if you just want a huge copy of this in really high resolution, you could do that. And I'm probably going to make more, since I have an even higher resolution photo that I could sell if you want to see it. But I really think this is Joseph Smith, and other people do it too. I'm not saying that this guy that looked at it really was just saying it just looks real. That's that's just his stand. And so you can get a really high resolution copy of it for a really good price, I think. And he really knows what he's doing. And yeah, so that's just my update, and hope everyone's well and staying healthy. I highly recommend getting, a neti pot where you can drain your sinuses, and peppermint oil if you have never had asthma and have trouble breathing. It opens up my lungs even though I use an inhaler. I hope everybody stays healthy and doesn't get pneumonia. Go to the doctor if you do. But there's a lot of things you can do if you don't have a fever and you don't have bad enough symptoms, because they won't do the test if you don't have like a fever and all the bad symptoms. You know, but you still want your lungs to be healthy. So everyone just do what the government says. Don't spread it. Stay away from elderly people that have COPD. Please. Anyway, they're the most at risk anyway. Have a good day.